Now, To the Point, with your host, News Channel 5's Kelly Dunn.
The honor and the integrity and the character upon which we ran this congressional race will go to Washington, D.C. and start to turn this ship around.
That is Republican Allen West in his victory speech Tuesday night after defeating Congressman Ron Klein in one of the most expensive and one of the most closely watched congressional races in the country. Good morning and welcome to the Point. He is part of the Republican landslide in Florida and the Republican takeover of the U.S. House of Representatives. He is Allen West, and he is our guest today. Congratulations, Congressman-elect, and thank you very much for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me back, Kelly. It's really an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Let's get to the point. In part of that victory speech, you talk about getting up there and turning that ship around.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about specifics and exactly what you plan to do to turn the ship around.
Well, I think one of the key things, you don't have that economic certainty and predictability out there right now. So we've got to do something. I think the tax cuts should be extended for all Americans, especially small business owners who depend upon those tax cuts. I think when we look at capital gains taxes, dividend taxes, those should not be raised. The state tax should not come back. So we've got to do those things to set that certainty and set the conditions for our small business growth. And then I talked about the corporate business tax rate that's 33 or 35%. I think we need to slash that, bring it down, 16%, flatten it out so that we can get those corporations and businesses being here in America, and especially down here in South Florida where we have great weather, and we need to have those things coming here and hiring our, South Florida, constituents.
A lot of the voters who went to the polls on Tuesday certainly were frustrated. Some of them may have just voted, let's vote them out and vote the new ones in.
Sure.
So you've got this frustration to deal with. How much time do you think, your constituents are going to give you until they really say, okay, he really is doing this?
That's a big concern. I think that it's not just myself, but this whole thing with the Republican Party being there.
Right.
There's disdain for the Democrats and that liberal progressive agenda, but the Republicans have not won back the trust and confidence. So I say in the first 90 to 120 days, you have to show, some of the key things that you're going to be doing to get this thing moving in the right direction, or else very quickly they'll put you on the ash heap, because the American people right now are not very patient.
No, not at all, and especially when it comes to jobs. And I know you were talking about the tax cuts.
13% unemployment down here in South Florida. There are some things that we need to do to turn that around. I think that has to be first and foremost.
How quickly do you think that can happen? I mean, I think there are people sitting out there going, when is this going to improve?
Well, I think that the most important thing starting in January, we can start to set those conditions. We can start to show those indicators that we're going to do the right things to help the small businesses out. We can start infusing money back into their pockets, because a lot of the unnecessary regulation is out there. Part of health care law that every purchase over $600 you have to fill out a 1099. Is those little insidious things that we need to make sure we eradicate.
Let's talk about seniors. There are plenty of them in the district you will be representing. They haven't received Social Security, increases in the past couple of years. What's the plan to help the seniors out there?
Well, I think when you look at no cost of living raises for Social Security and also for military retirees, but yet we have members of Congress who have been consistently getting their automatic pay raises. So it's that type of duplicitous action that we have to get rid of, so that we can once again making sure we're taking care of our seniors. We got to look at Medicare, and we can look at how we can streamline this program, because we got these four stovepipes between Part A to Part D, and how can we improve the pay for fee servicing so that it's more. I think it needs to focus more on the outcomes than just the fact that people are going in there and getting these services done. Social Security, we got to repair it. I think that it has to get back into the independent trust fund account, and that's part of getting Americans back working, because if you get Americans back working, you have more people paying into it.
It affects everything. It certainly is what's holding the housing market from rebounding.
And Palm Beach County is #1 in the state of Florida for foreclosures, and the state of Florida is #3 in the nation.
And yet when you want to kind of strengthen Social Security, and you want to help all of these programs that in turn help the people. You're talking, though, with the deficit numbers and the problems, the money problems that are going on up in Washington. I mean, it almost seems a little like, How can it all work?
Well, this is so important. If you look at the trends, what happened back in 1994 when you had the flip of the House, and Newt Gingrich comes in, Bill Clinton is the president, initially started out his first 2 years with a little bit of a left agenda, then all of a sudden these guys come together. They understood the tax cuts were very important, but they also understood about turning around the growth of government, turning around this overspending. And guess what they were able to do? Democrat president, a very conservative Republican Speaker of the House, and they created a surplus. So we need to go back and look at the formula that they had, and we need to apply that now. And that's what we should be looking to do. I mean, what are the wasteful programs we have in Washington, D.C.? What are the agencies that have been created but aren't doing, what they were intended to do? And I think it's going to be some hard cuts that we got to make.
How much do you owe the Tea Party for being here today as a congressman-elect?
I think it's very important because I think that movement of the people, that grassroots movement was very important for us because we were able to get our message out through them. And the fact that you look at the money that we were able to raise, close to $6 million, but 96% of that were individual contributions, the average from $78 to $80.
The Tea Party, though, says they, too, are going to hold the officials that have now been elected with their help. They're going to hold them accountable as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're going to be answering to a lot.
And I'm perfectly fine with that. It's just the same as when you're a commander in the military. Your soldiers are going to hold you responsible, especially when you take them into combat to keep them alive. So this is a huge burden that I'm willing to take up to Washington, D.C. And if I don't do the things that are right by the people here in Congressional District 22, then they should send me home. But I don't think they have to worry about that.
It was one of the nastiest campaigns, yours
Extremely.
With Ron Klein's. I mean, it was just, it got pretty brutal. What's your message to his supporters?
Well, my message to his supporters is that you may not like me, you certainly aren't going to love me, but I think I earned your respect because no matter what you threw at me, the kitchen sink, the toilet bowl, the bathroom tub, we stayed on message, we stayed focused. We talked about the contrast between Congressman Klein and myself, and I think that honor, integrity, and character won out in the end. So I think that as I go to Washington, D.C., if I do the positive things, we start to see an improvement, not just in our congressional district, but being a voice all across this country. I think the people will start to see that I'm not an extremist, I'm not a radical, I'm not a member of any crazed motorcycle group. That was just all the antics that were part of this election.
This was one of the most expensive congressional races in the country, though. I mean, is this the new standard? Is this now what it takes?
Well, I hope not. I think that one of the things that we were able to show in this election was that a person could come in, not part of a political class, not from a political family, certainly not a millionaire, I mean, because the career in the Army is not going to leave you as that. But if you have the right type of message, you have a conviction and a commitment to this country, the people, as we just talked about with the Tea Party, they will elevate you from in and amongst you. And I think that's the most important thing is that this is a political process now that the people have once again taken over. But this is an expensive media market down here, and you got to be able to get your message out.
And boy, did everybody.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost like now you're watching TV and you're so used to being bombarded that now,
it's a little bit of a hangover for people, I think.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
A welcomed one for many, I think, because I think they were getting a little tiresome. Looking back on the campaign, is there anything you would have done differently? No,
I think we did. I think we ran a very good campaign. I think it was very positive. It stayed on point. And the whole thing, the difference between 2008 and this election cycle was because I had more time. Just coming back from Afghanistan, only having an 8-month campaign and being new to the scene, you had to prove yourself. And I think we were able to do that in the 2008 campaign. The political atmosphere changed in 2010, and the message resonated even more so.
Well, in the economy.
It was huge. It was absolutely huge. But I still think, that our national security is still an important part. You saw the terrorist attack that was barely thwarted in France with the diffusing of those bombs and the ink cartridge bombs that we headed off. So there's still a vile and vicious enemy out there we have to confront. But part of our national security is our economic strength, and that's what we have to turn around.
Let's talk about the transition. That happens in 2 weeks?
I'll start some transitioning with Congressman Klein's staff, and then I'll go up to D.C. for the orientation the week after next.
And you've already been I understand your phone's ringing already.
Oh, absolutely. My if you try to leave me a message right now, is full. And you've had a lot of members of Congress on the GOP side already calling, offering their congratulations. But of course, one of the things coming up is all the leadership positions people are vying for, and a lot of folks are asking for support. And you know, the key thing right now is to get the opportunity to get up there, make an assessment on the ground before you start throwing out your endorsement or whatever here or there, and then you can make a good, educated voting decision once you're up there for orientation.
And how do you make a name for yourself when you're one of many in the House of Representatives?
Well, the thing that I always told folks is if I could command 650 soldiers in combat in Iraq, I can deal with 434 other members of the House.
Hopefully you won't deal with that many battles up on the floor, not like what you've been accustomed to in your career.
They're ideological battles.
Exactly.
And I think
not so physical.
Not physical, but they're ideological battles, and so you have to use your wit. You know, now it's the time you transition, you become an intellectual warrior. And I think it's so important, though, that you stay with your principles. And I think that's what folks are looking for me to go up there to Washington, D.C., because I don't want to sacrifice my principles.
All right, so let's fast forward 2 years.
Oh my
and you're
gosh.
looking back
Yeah.
on everything you've done. What are you most proud of?
I think that if we can turn around the unemployment situation, if we can do something to ease the foreclosure situation, if we can start to see small businesses grow, if we can see more corporations and businesses coming here to South Florida especially, if we can make sure that our security situation is better, the illegal immigration and securing our borders, and the health care. I think that's one of the key things that we have to reform health care, but we have to do it where we're addressing the true costs of the health care industry that we have out there, and not a government takeover, but really look into our free market, free enterprise solutions to make it better for our citizens.
Are you going to be accessible?
Absolutely. You'll be able to call me up and have me
Not
here.
just, I'm not talking just about me. I mean, yeah,
no,
exactly.
Everybody,
right.
everybody. I mean, that's
people
important.
you're representing.
That's true, and I think that was one of the things that was very successful for us because I resemble the people of the district. I'm just like anybody else walking the streets.
Congressman-elect, thank you very much.
Thanks for having
me.
Good
luck.
Kelly. Thank you so much.
I'm sure we'll be talking to you again.
Absolutely.
And coming up next, the celebrating is over. It's time to get to work. What does Rick Scott have ahead of him as he becomes ready to become governor?
I hope Rick Scott remembers that there are 2.5 million Floridians who did not vote for him, and that his highest priority has to be to bring our state together to meet our challenges.
That was Alex Sink the morning after the election as she conceded the race to Rick Scott for governor. She raises an interesting point, and here to discuss it and more are a couple of members of our roundtable, Brian Crowley, the author of the Crowley Political Report, and our own News Channel 5's John Shainman. Thank you, gentlemen. So she does bring up a good point. He has to kind of bring the state together, or does he? It's now, ruled by Republicans, so...
Well, I mean, it's always a good point. The loser always has a couple of million votes, So, I mean, that's the nature of politics.
Yeah.
Republicans swept the state.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Rick Scott, I mean, a good governor has to embrace all of Floridians. You're the governor of all of Florida once you become governor, and of course he has to do that. But he also is going to stick to the things that got him elected and the things that he said he was going to do, and he's going to be in a very strong position to do it with overwhelming majorities in the state house and the state senate. So and a complete majority. All of the cabinet members are Republican now. So he's in a very strong position to get things done he wants to get done.
And we are a very diverse state, though, as we talk about throughout this campaign. Jacksonville is sometimes referred to as, South Georgia.
Yeah.
And down here, Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, it's a different melting pot, if you will. And Rick Scott, coming from the southwest part of the state, he's only been here 8-9 years or whatever. He's going to, he's got to get to learn all of the minutiae, if you will, of each county. But by the same token, as you said, how much does he need to learn? Well, that
as far as getting his
seen.
agenda passed, that's going to be an easier thing.
His toughest lesson, frankly, is going to be to learn how to govern. This is not being chairman of the board or the CEO of your company where you go in, listen to a few people, and then just do whatever you want to do. He has to get along with the legislature. He has to get along with the bureaucracy and the agencies. He has to be able to, make government function. Just because you say you want something to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. And, governing is a lot different than running government like a business.
And, he's got a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn.
Sure.
Who knew of this guy 6 months ago? Not many people.
Not many people know much about Rick Scott, and I think he needs to spend some time over the next few months telling everybody a little more about Rick Scott. As we talked about the other day on election night, 6 months ago, very few Floridians knew who Rick Scott was.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. And as you said, Florida, running the state like a business, Florida kind of bucked the trend. I mean, California had a hugely successful woman who was out there, Meg Whitman, the CEO of eBay, was used the exact same line. She wanted to run California like a business. It didn't work there. So why it worked here and why it didn't work out there?
Did he change campaigning, though? I mean, did he buy his way into this governor's mansion?
We tend to look askance at people who spend their own money, but at the same time we complain loudly about the candidates who rely on the big contributions that come through 527s and PACs. I mean, the money is always there. Alex Sink, to her credit, said, I had enough money to wage the campaign I wanted to wage on election night. So, frankly, I'm not sure that I'm that opposed to somebody spending all their own money. He certainly doesn't owe anybody anything.
All right, look at Michael Bloomberg in New York City. I mean, he spent tens of millions of dollars to become mayor of New York City. I think what Rick Scott bought was he bought name recognition out of the gate, because he got out there early, got those ads out there early, and that very simple slogan, let's get to work. It wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't complicated. It was just a simple message, and I think that resonated with a lot of people. When I first saw that ad, I didn't know who the guy was either. I said, this guy's running for governor. Is he for real? I didn't know. I mean, it could have been anybody at that point, but he got himself entrenched in all the media markets. Money helped there. And,
it continues to be interesting that you couldn't get a more serious charge, it seems to me, than saying this guy ran a company that defrauded Medicare. I mean, got a lot of old folks who go to the polls in this state. A $1.7 billion fine, and he won. Now, it's not a knock on Rick Scott. It says more, it leaves me curious what voters were thinking when they voted for Rick Scott, despite these allegations.
Exactly.
Are we in the land of second chances? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very possibly we are. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the first weekend after the election, and for Republicans, it's a good weekend. For Democrats, not so good. Well, we had Allen West on a little bit earlier. First, let's get comments from both of you on the congressman-elect.
I thought Allen West said something very interesting. He said that basically the new guys in Congress, the new Republican House, has 90 to 100 days, 120 days to really show that they're moving on some issues, because he feels like voters are impatient. And I think he's right on the money. The Republicans have talked strongly this past year about all the major changes they want to make, and they're going to need to take some action quickly. And as Allen West, I'm sure, is more than aware, the campaign for his re-election will start in just a matter of months. And all of these guys who go brand new to Congress will have that in the back of their minds as well. That they're likely to have opponents in 6 months to a year from now, and they're already going to be in the middle of an election. So they are going to go to Washington expecting some very fast action.
Yeah, they're still frustrated, so they want results immediately.
Absolutely, right now. And the question that Brian just brought up in terms of getting people to run against these guys right away. Well, just looking at that race, the Ron Klein-Allen West race, would Ron Klein decide to come back in 6 months or so? He was kind of coy about it back on election night. I was at the Klein camp. You could just sort of feel the energy leaving the room as the votes came in. I was very surprised, because we had talked about how close we thought this race was going to be, and for that to be pretty much double digits almost all the way until the final votes came in, where I think it was still about an 8-point spread when all was said and done, was very surprising to me, although Klein certainly had two things working against him from day one, that he was a Democrat and that he was an incumbent. I think Allen West ran a very smart campaign. At Ron Klein's campaign, it was all about attacks. It was nothing but attacks. I can't recall, except for interviews that perhaps I did with the congressman, anything we saw on TV was Allen West is too extreme, Allen West is too extreme, but we never got to see, I'm Ron Klein, here's what I have done. Now, again, this is Sunday morning quarterbacking at this point, but just stepping back and looking at this race, that's kind of what I saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, there's back into in the state house and the state senate, we're talking about a special session coming up mid-November. Already ready to get in there and start changing decisions that have already been made by Charlie Crist.
Right. I mean, usually you have the organizational meeting where everybody gets their parking spots assigned, and people start jostling for committee member positions, and that'll happen on the 16th. And Mike Herodopoulos from up on the Space Coast said, well, I already want to start looking at what Charlie Crist, the governor, had vetoed, and I think now that we essentially have this supermajority and we can override anything, I think they're going to specifically look at some money that had been cut for Shands Hospital up in Gainesville. What a lot of people were concerned about was whether or not Senate Bill 6 was going to come back, the teacher tenure issue. At this point, it doesn't look like it's going to be addressed right away, but I can almost guarantee it will come back in some form a little bit later.
Absolutely.
They're going to be ready to get to work. We'll be back in a moment. Time flies, and we thank you for spending your time with us on today's To The Point. Have a great weekend.